Global hunger is being made worse by the sudden cuts in foreign aid from the United States. While U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio claimed last week that no one has died after the sudden closure of the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, modeling out of Boston University estimates that almost 300,000 people have died already. Now, of those deaths, more than 96,000 are adults, 201,000 are children. The causes include disease, soaring healthcare costs, as well as malnutrition. More than 57,000 children have died from malnutrition alone, with that number expected to reach almost 168,000 within 1 year. Okay, joining us now to talk further about the impact of those USAID cuts, especially on food aid, distribution, nutrition programs, and treatment for malnutrition, is Raj Patel. He's a research professor in the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin, and a member of the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Sean.
Okay, now one of the first acts of DOGE and the Trump administration was shuttering USAID. And as predicted, it is leading to many negative impacts: increase in the spread of disease, rise in preventable deaths, as we just outlined. Bring us up to date, and your thoughts on the information we just outlined.
Well, I mean, Haiti was in receipt of over $300 million, primarily for healthcare, but also for food. And of course, when you take that away, then not only are you taking away the food, but when bodies are spiraling into malnutrition, particularly if they're fighting HIV/AIDS, when the funding for all of that is cut, of course you're going to have deaths. And you know, we've, despite Marco Rubio's protests, we've seen the same not just in Haiti, but around the world. Somalia, for instance, received 65% of its support from USAID, and again, despite claims that that no difference was felt, we've already seen hundreds of children being admitted to now increasingly underfunded hospitals to be able to fight off malnutrition.
We have seen some of the harshest impacts, as you mentioned, in the African continent, certainly, but we really can't talk about hunger, starvation without mentioning Gaza. Even the way the limited aid there is being distributed right now. Do you see a correlation between what has happened with the USAID and just the chaos on the ground in Gaza, notwithstanding the assault that's been going on for 20 months now?
Well, absolutely. I mean, were enough food to be allowed to go in, that would merely scratch the surface of the problem. And I think this is the interesting thing about USAID. We're all saying, well, is it awful that USAID is being cut? And it is. But worse is why it is needed in the first place. And I think that's the question that we're not really asking. That we're, on World Hunger Day, we're not really exploring the root causes of hunger. We're merely addressing the Band-Aid. And USAID was always a sort of superficial response to some very deep problems that the US itself caused. I mean, if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, in the 1980s, at the beginning of the 80s, lots of African countries were self-sufficient in food. It was only because of US-sponsored economic policy that swept away African countries' capacities to be able to feed themselves, that you need aid. And of course, the parallel with Gaza there is very obvious. Gaza was once, and Palestine was once able to feed itself, and now look at it.
Yeah, getting back to USAID, though, I'm curious, what happened to the food earmarked for areas that are in such need right now? A lot of it comes from U.S. farmers. So how are they being impacted in 2025 as well?
Well, I mean, you're seeing U.S. farmers up in arms about this, obviously, because, again, USAID was a way not really of ending hunger, at least at its inception. It was a way of getting rid of surplus food from the United States and shipping it to somewhere else in the world. So U.S. farmers were very dependent on it, and you're seeing that food rotting because there's no way of getting it out of the storage facilities. And U.S. farmers, of course, are feeling the impact very directly because the USAID is not buying from them anymore.
I'm curious what you think this shuttering USAID is doing to the U.S. reputation globally, because in simple terms, providing assistance, preventing starvation and famine internationally does not fit into Donald Trump's vision for America First.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, I think the US is taking a very big hit in terms of its reputational damage because USAID, where it was, particularly in parts of the world where it was providing support for, fighting HIV/AIDS, for instance, was absolutely vital. But again, USAID was successful because it made people forget that the reason they needed support for HIV/AIDS drugs is because the US blocked patent-free access to AIDS drugs in the 1990s.
Okay, how are other nations stepping up, and is private giving as well picking up? Is there any entity or entities out there that can fill this void?
Well, I mean, you are seeing Middle Eastern powers, you're seeing Turkey, a range of countries upping their giving, but it's a drop in the ocean compared to the need that USAID, the void that USAID has left. So I'm very much hoping that World Hunger Day spurs a number of countries, particularly those in a position to be able to give more, to be able to support local farmers, to be able to grow for their own communities, rather than shipping food from halfway around the world and wiping out whatever local farming situation there is in the host country.
Raj, I think you make some good points talking about how hunger got so bad in many parts of the world, and people in the U.S. may bristle at it, but it's difficult to point out. People don't want to hear these kind of negative things. And when you hear Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that no one has died due to USAID cuts, how can he say that? I mean, meaning clearly there's information out there that proves him wrong. And secondly, aid organizations are filing lawsuits now in support of USAID. Do you see that organization being resurrected in any way, and any positive outcome of these lawsuits, or is it just a way to drag on the suffering?
Unfortunately, in the absence of concerted international effort, minus the United States, unfortunately, all we're seeing is a rearguard action to be able to bring back this institution in a sort of shell of itself. But what we really need is a momentum to actually transform the international aid regime so that we do get to tackle some of these root causes, Sean, because right now, again, we're discussing Band-Aids when we should be talking about permanent solutions.